We live in a time where masculinity is shamed and men don't know what it means to be a man. As a pastor and counselor, I've spent the better part of my life equipping and training others. My goal with this show is to translate my hard-earned experience into tools and tactics to help you become stronger as a man. This is the BraveCo podcast. I'm your host, Jason Vellet. All right, BraveCo men, this week I am with my good friend, Carl Ladd. Carl, thank you so much for coming on.
Of course. Thanks for having me, Jay.
Well, you're an old podcast pro, so this should be easy.
I wish.
No, I'm just kidding. Man, I'm so stoked to have you on here. We've spent quite a bit of time together, especially starting out in 2018, where I'm going to dive into that a little bit.
Yeah.
But before I do, I just want to kind of go over and explain who you are. So,
Sure.
You work for Bethel Church. You've worked there. How long have you been there?
9 years.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah. I love it.
And so you oversee Bethel Global Response.
Yep.
Which
correct.
is basically like you guys go and help in places that are devastated, in need, hurricanes, tornadoes.
Yeah.
Ukraine, which we're going to talk about, Turkey.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Wherever people are hurting, wherever the crisis is, that's where we want to be.
So 2018, I think we'd known each other before that, but that was kind of like a real convergence for us.
Yeah.
Because I'm from Northern California. So if you're listening to this and you're like, even you don't know where we're from Northern California, Redding, California, and California for the past, 5 years, has had some serious wildfires.
Yeah. We had a break this last year, but the 5 years running up to that were brutal.
And hopefully we'll get a break this year. We've had so much rain. But 2018, we had what was called the car fire.
Yeah.
And the car fire was crazy because of the magnitude, but it really caught everyone off guard because it was like in our city. Like the fire actually came from Whiskeytown into Redding and like burned up a whole bunch of the town, places where you would have thought, like if someone had asked me, hey, is it possible for this house to burn down? I'd have been like, no way.
Absolutely. Yeah. 1,100 homes were lost. And the fire crossed the Sacramento River. Like you're saying, it was things that nobody had considered a wildfire being able to do.
It's kind of crazy. Like when I was 20 years old, just young, right? I got into firefighting. Yeah. And I went from being in the school of ministry to then working wildland firefighting. And it was probably my favorite job I've ever had because of, like what guy doesn't want to pack around a chainsaw, pack some gas, camp with 20 other dudes, fall trees, chase fire, light fire, right? Like it's the ideal scenario for me, it was like the ideal thing.
Totally.
And so I'd had quite a bit of fire background. I did that for like 2 years, enjoyed it a lot. It was tough on a family though. So that was the hard thing for me. Yeah. But in 2018, I remember there was that small fire in Whiskeytown, and they were just kind of monitoring it. Mm-hmm. And I was out fly fishing on the river, having a good time. And in the summertime, you can fly fish basically till like 9 o'clock at night. By the time you get off the river and get home, it's like 11 o'clock at night. But it's pretty epic. And I remember floating down the Sacramento and turning back and looking towards Redding, and the sky was like glowing orange. Yeah. And I was like, wow, this is crazy. Again, just not really thinking much of it. Yeah. But just kind of like enjoying the night and being like, wow, that fire's crazy. That thing's big. Yeah. And then it was like a matter of, I don't know, like maybe it was, I feel like I got off the river at like 9 o'clock, and by 10 o'clock, it was like freaking Armageddon. Yeah. Like people were going crazy because all of a sudden it was like, oh, this is coming into town. No one had great information, but people started to panic. I don't know. Were you a part of it? Like, did you remember that?
Oh,
were you
yeah.
Here in town?
Yeah, I was in town. We had opened up a cooling center, like, cause it's hot as anything. It's like 115 degrees during the day, and it's smoky. And There were small communities on the west side of Whiskeytown that were getting evacuated.
Oh yeah.
And we actually had some, especially elderly in our church that were part of those communities that were getting evacuated. So we opened up one of our church campuses as a cooling center, really for people to come, get out of the smoke, get out of the heat, and figure out where they're going to go. Because it was really small. I mean, there was only a few hundred people that were being evacuated. Yeah. So we were doing that in coordination with our county. And so I was actually there. And again, 8, 9 o'clock at night. And my wife calls me and is like, hey, the cops just banged on our door. We have to evacuate. I was like, what? And because I've been inside this whole time, talking with people, and I go outside and the same thing you're talking, like just Armageddon. Like the sky is red, like this red, black smoke everywhere. Ash is actively falling on the church. And I'm just like, what happened? Like it was a matter of, I think it was about 2 hours. They said the fire moved. I think it was like 8 or 10 miles. The winds totally shifted because it was blowing west of town is all wildland. So everybody thought it was just going to stay a wildland fire. Like whatever that happens.
No big deal.
That's standard for us, right? Yeah. In NorCal. And then the wind shifted and it just blew it straight into town. That's when the fire tornado, all of that happened, and it was just wild.
So literally, when the fire crossed the Sacramento River, it was a literal tornado.
Yeah.
Like it picked up. So there's a memorial site for a firefighter who was in a truck.
Yeah.
And it literally picked that truck up. I think it threw the guy out of the vehicle, and he was just stopped. It like he died. I mean, he was literally stopped. The fire had so much force with the winds. I mean, it was just insane. What was crazy though is like in a moment it went to like dog eat dog.
Yeah.
Like people were pulling up to the gas station and like cutting each other off.
Yeah.
It was crazy.
Yeah.
My wife called me and she was like, hey, we have to evacuate. And my parents live out in Shingletown, which is like 30 minutes east of Redding. And so you have to make all these decisions, right? When you have to evacuate, like what's the most important thing to grab?
Yeah.
So right away I was like, I grabbed all of my guns,
yep,
threw my computer in the truck.
Yeah.
And then I had a whole bunch of meat in my freezer.
Oh yeah.
Like wild game.
Yeah.
So I literally packed my whole freezer into the back of my truck. Like
that's impressive.
Yeah. I had my son and my dad helped. We just loaded up the whole freezer and we took everything up to Shingletown.
Yeah.
And then just literally just battened down the hatches. But it's kind of crazy because the next day, like I got a call. I don't remember who called, but we got a call like, hey, the city needs help.
Yeah.
Like this fire just is going crazy. And we don't know when or how we'll be able to stop it. But it just started out like Bethel Church became this place of refuge, which you can talk a little bit about what BGR does and dive into it a little bit more and how we kind of support. I think we just started out with our city, did we not? Maybe I'm wrong, but.
Yeah. So we started back in 2012. So that was 6 years before Car Fire. Okay. But pretty low key. And really with the heart to see what does it look like for the church, the local church, to be equipped on its community's worst day. For all of the history of the church, like people have gone to the church when they have issues, when they're at their lowest, like the church is there. And it's our mandate. Like when you read the scriptures, it's our mandate to take care of the widow, take care of the orphan,
right.
Be those pillars for our community. And so we wanted to do that in the context of disaster response and crisis relief. So that's my background. I got my education in it, got my degree in it. During my degree, I actually took a course mitigating the secondary disasters of faith-based response. So it was a FEMA course that basically looked at, okay, it's a problem when the church responds to disasters because they actually create secondary disasters.
No way.
Yeah, because you get all these good intentioned people like, oh, we got to help. Like it's our mandate as a church to help. But if they don't know how to help, really good intentions with poor implementations cause severe consequences.
Dude, I feel like that's a life message, right? Like I feel like that happens all the time.
Oh, all the time. But for me as a student, and like I love Jesus. And I'm like, are you kidding me? Like, it just made me angry. Like, I had this like anger inside of me. Like, that is so wrong. Like, the church should be setting the standard for what disaster response looks like, no matter what the scale of the event.
Yeah.
And so really I kind of took it on as kind of a life goal of like, let's redefine this. Like, what does it take for a church to be able to actually respond, not only in a way that's effective, but actually it causes the government, these other large organizations to have to realize the value of the local church, and who they are and what they can do for their community.
It's interesting because it's like, if you don't have real tools, if you're not equipped, if you're not prepared, then you're just a hazard.
Absolutely. Then you're just in the way.
You're just in the way.
You're another mouth to feed. You're another person that needs shelter. You're another person that needs water.
Yeah.
Or worse yet, you're another person that needs to be rescued.
Right.
You know, you put yourself in harm's way.
Yeah. That's really interesting, huh?
You know,
it just carries over in a whole bunch of different areas of life. Okay. Keep going.
Totally.
I cut you off.
No worries. But yeah, so as Bethel Global Response, that was our kind of overarching vision of like, all right, what does it look like for a church to be able to respond effectively? And where does it fit in the larger framework of disaster response with all these, you know, the incident command system and FEMA and the governmental response, both here domestically in the United States and also internationally under the United Nations system.
Because you can't just roll in and be like, hey, we want to help out in the world. We're going to do it our way.
Yeah, I mean, you can, and historically, a lot of people have done that with great intentions, and it doesn't go anywhere.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, if you want to truly make a lasting impact, it takes a lot of intentionality to do that. And so we started gathering kind of experts and guys out of the fire field, you know, retired chiefs and things like that, and started putting together a program. Director at that time came out of some very large non-government organizations, and started piecing this together of, all right, how do we equip the church? You know, how do we equip our church as kind of a proof of concept almost? And then how do we respond effectively all over the world? And so we had started doing that, but really the car fire was the first time where it's like, all right, rubber's hitting the road. Like, it's happening in our community. You know, we responded to a lot of other churches and partnered with other churches in their community. But this was the first time that on a significant scale, it was happening in our backyard to our families. And so it's a whole nother, we had incredible lessons learned.
Yeah.
Because it's one thing, you know, we're going to talk about Ukraine. It's one thing for me to go choose to put myself in Ukraine, and I know when I'm going to pull myself out of Ukraine, and I'm in and out. It's another thing for my Ukrainian brothers that are there serving every day. Yeah. Not, you know, they haven't seen their family in 9 months. Like, it's another thing when it's happening to you, it's happening to your community, than when you're choosing to put yourself in there to help a community that you're not really attached to. Yeah. So we had incredible lessons learned. But thankfully, and you know, the Lord gets you ready. Thankfully, we were pretty well ready and equipped when our community needed us. And so that's when you got pulled in, and we got to spend like 3 weeks of 20-hour days together.
At least 3 weeks. I think before, like my dad was the original one that had the vision for a global response team. Yeah.
Yeah. His vision was what is it to have a supernatural Red Cross was his words. Okay. You know, something that moves on that scale, that has that level of influence and impact, but moves with the fullness of God and the fullness of the kingdom. And dude, not limited. I'm getting
fired up.
Oh, dude, I know. I'm like, all right, let's go. But not just, I mean, we can only do so much. Even if we have all the resources in the world. I mean, we see it all over. Like the UN is falling short all over the world. Yeah. Like they're not meeting their own stated objectives. They're not needing their own, you know, what's needed to address the issues our world is facing. That's not the solution. Like the solution is not being as big and well-resourced as you can. The solution is Jesus. Yeah. And so how do you bring those two things together? That we're not going to go and, you know, the Lord tells us to be, you know, wise as serpents, you know, like it's got to be the two-handed. Like we're going to do our best, put our best effort and intentionality forward. And then we're going to leave some room for him to do only what he can do.
Man, that's cool.
And so that's what we've been able to see start to happen.
So when my dad, I think when he first started talking about global response, I was just like, oh man, just, like just another idea that, because there's tons of ideas, like our community is not short of ideas.
That is a true statement.
And so when we started thinking about like, oh, we're going to go and be like the supernatural Red Cross.
Yeah.
It's like, well, how are we going to do that? And why would we do that? And like, can't we just do like revival in church and some conferences? And, but then for me, what happened is 2018, when the car fire happened, I wasn't planning on doing anything to help.
Sure.
So I was at my parents' house. I actually think my dad was gone. Bill was gone. Eric and Candace, who were the pastors of the church, were gone.
Dan was gone.
Everybody, all the leaders were gone.
Yep. Every single member of senior leadership team was out of town.
And I remember that morning I got a call from somebody. I don't remember who. And Lauren, I remember standing there with Lauren, and she was like, hey, we're the only ones. Like, I wasn't even on senior leadership team. We're the only leadership here. Like, we're literally the only ones here that can go and open up the church, can make some decisions, and so I remember just being like, okay, well, I guess we just show up and start to help. And I remember meeting you at the church and just being like, dude, what do we do? How do we facilitate like being a help? And man, we spent, was it only 3 weeks? Cause it felt like freaking 5 months.
It was a while. I think in total it was like 2 months. Yeah. But it was 3 weeks of all day, every day.
Well, it was so cool. Yeah. It was so cool because like I went from being like, oh man, this fire's crazy, to like in the game, literally thinking through like, okay, we have to help provide food, some shelter, but like tons of supplies, and become this, help me with the word. Like we became this, center for goods and food.
Yeah. Distribution center.
Yeah. Distribution center. So we built out, like we took our church and literally transformed it into this well-oiled distribution machine. Yeah. It was friggin' awesome.
It was awesome. Yeah. We had people come in from FEMA, from Cal OES, Office of Emergency Services. People were flying into town just to see the distribution center because they're like, hey, we've heard about this thing that we've never seen a distribution. So distribution is where you take all the donations, because everybody is donated everything from used clothes to water bottles to toothbrushes.
Used underwear is my favorite.
Oh yeah. That was your section. You were the one in charge of that one,
bro. Listen, even in the worst hellstorm, I'm not putting on used underwear. I'll just freeball it.
Exactly. That's a far wise. See, that's why you're so wise, Jay.
I get it. Man.
But it's the thing nobody wants to touch.
Yeah.
Because there's real need. Like people that just not only, 1,100 families lost their homes. But at the height of it, I think there was close to 40,000 people displaced, like couldn't go to their homes, didn't know if they lost their homes. And like what happened to my wife, like it's a cop banging on your door saying, get out now, or you're going to die. Is the way they put it. Cause they don't know. So I ran home and got my wife, and you could hear propane bottles blowing, like it's intense. So most people, if they, you were on the other side of town, so you had a little bit more time to pack your meat. But people on the west side of town, like there's no time.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden, and it's at night, so you throw your kids in the car, not realizing, oh, they're in their jammies, or they're just in their underwear. Oh, I didn't grab a toothbrush. I didn't grab a blanket. And now where are you staying? So there's legitimate need for everybody to have those immediate supplies. Most people can't afford to just go restock at the grocery store. But then there's a ton of stuff like used underwear that nobody needs. And so as the distribution center, you got to sift through all of that. So normally it ends up just being piles in a parking lot somewhere that people have to go rummage through to get what they need for their kid. But for us, and what kind of our passion is for Bethel Global Response is, it doesn't take a lot for a church to be able to respond effectively, especially to their own community. They just need to look at, okay, what are we good at? Like in our time of normalcy, or as an individual, like what are my strengths? Like our church, because we're Bethel, we do how many events every year where we have thousands of people come through our building. Tons. And, you know, there's the gift store element of it, and there's book signing elements of it. And then there's, you know, ministry element, like
the food,
the food side of it. So like we were really good at knowing how to funnel a lot of people through our building, a lot of different touch points on those people, how to host people well.
Yeah.
So we just took what our church did and gathered those same teams and said, okay, you're normally a host, like to welcome people in the door. You're going to do that same thing that you do for conferences, but you're welcoming
This is a disaster conference.
Exactly. And so we had people, you know, that just literally lost everything coming to the door and getting greeted like they're coming to a prophetic conference, you know, and getting welcomed. And then one of our guys was like, hey, they're not going to be able to carry everything we're giving them. Let's get grocery carts. And so he went to a bunch of the different stores in town and had grocery carts in our sanctuary, which was a bad move. We had to recarpet most of the place after that, but it was really good for the people. But so they got a shopping experience. So rather than this, you know, oftentimes distribution centers, chaos and can be really demoralizing, and no dignity in it. All of a sudden, like they were at a place where they were like being loved on really intentionally, really well. And the dignity was put back in it. And it wasn't something of chaos. It was actually something of peace and receiving what they needed. As well as we had partners come in, Mercy Chefs come in and do hot meals. So then at the end of their distribution, they get everything they need for their families. They get a hot meal that they can sit down and then our ministry teams being able to be in there to love on them and debrief them if they were going through trauma, things like that. So, it was an amazing time of really just getting to be what our city needed, what our community needed when they needed us the most.
It's so cool because I think that for a lot of us on staff, that was the point where we went like, okay, there's tons of people around the world today that need this level of excellence in their hometown, right? In their crisis, really.
Yeah.
And I think that helped me personally be like, I want to put my full weight behind BGR any way that I can, because when my family was in need, they were there somebody was there to help out, right?
Yeah.
And so that was massive. You guys, so basically the car fire. Oh, the other big thing that we did, I forgot, is we did a lot of ash outs.
We did a lot of
Can you
ash
explain
outs.
what an ash out is?
Yeah. So ash out, again, so the immediate need were the the things that they needed to survive. So that was where we did the distribution center. That really goes away after the first couple of weeks. And then the next real poignant need is ash outs, which is where people are actually getting back onto their properties and seeing their homes for the first time that are just reduced to ash. And so wildfires are unique compared to typical structure fires, because your typical structure fire, if you're not from a wildfire prone area, it gets extinguished, right? So you have these partially burned buildings. So it's still recognizable. You know, you might have lost your kitchen and your living room, but you still have your bedrooms, kind of thing that you can kind of go in and salvage. They might have to take out your whole house, but there's still things that made it through. With wildfires, they're trying to stop the progression of the fire. And so they're not putting out structures. So once a structure gets on fire, it burns all the way out.
Yeah, they move to the next one.
Yeah, so these homes get reduced to like 6 inches of ash. 2-story home, maybe 8 inches of ash. And so just everything of your life is in 6 inches of ash. But some things make it through, wedding rings, dog tags, things like that, things of either really sentimental value or, like the people that have like gold bars or silver coins or things like that, a monetary value. You can still get those things out. So an ash out or sifting is where we go in with those homeowners. It's all toxic because everything is, made up of chemicals in our house. And so when it gets to ash, you can't breathe that in. You can't get it on your skin. So we have to go in full Tyvek, coverall suits and respirators and glasses and everything. And we literally shovel by shovelful sift through ashes to find people's wedding rings or diamonds or gold or,
like those collectibles. It's all they really have left.
Yeah. And it's really a ministry of hope where it's the one and only time after a wildfire that people get things returned to them that they thought were lost. Like everything else is gone, but whatever you can salvage from them from an ash out, that's all that they're going to get back.
Yeah. I remember the first time I went on an ash out, and you rock up to this home and it's just like gone. Like you're saying, I mean, it looks like an ashtray.
Yeah.
And with a foundation still around it. And I mean, the people are there, right? Sometimes they were there.
Yeah.
And you start talking to them, and they're just like, I mean, telling you the story about the fire and leaving. But then they're like, man, it would be so cool to get these 3 things.
Yeah.
If I could find these 3 things.
Yeah.
And then a lot of times we would.
Yeah.
Right. We're working in like 100, 110, 115 degree heat with smoke outside still. And you're like fully suited up. You feel like Darth Vader with like the mask on.
Yeah.
The respirator, actually, not a mask, a respirator.
Yeah.
And then digging through. And when you find stuff, like when you find the ring, it's like so exciting.
Yeah.
And just provides so much help and hope for people. I don't even know, how many did we do? Do you remember?
I think we did 118 or something like that.
Yeah. God, it was so many.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
no, I'm sorry. That was our forestry number. We did like 156 ash outs. Yeah.
Yeah. It was a lot.
Yeah.
That was cool. Let's, I want to talk a little bit about, Turkey and Ukraine.
Yeah.
And partly because it's really relevant right now.
Sure.
With what's happening in the world today. And we're going to skip over the political side of it because that's really not our genre. And people can have their different political opinions on whether the United States should help or shouldn't help the war efforts. But to me, like this whole thing to me is all about being able to meet somebody in their place of need and preparing yourself, right? Like being mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually ready to be the body of Christ.
Yeah.
So when somebody walks away from this podcast today, I want them to go like, I'm inspired to be the body of Christ in my area of influence, which may be global response. It may be, whatever, emotional health. It may, there's a lot of different places. And so Ukraine is one of those places that honestly, man, it's just so devastating. And I haven't even been over there, but it's so devastating to just have like, to hear the stories of what's happening on the front lines, these people's lives that are completely being disrupted and turned upside down.
Yeah.
And I think that it's easy too for us to be in another place, right? Like I'm in Northern California, and to be like, oh yeah, there are people in Ukraine who are really suffering. And you're like, bummer. I'm going to go fishing today.
Yeah.
Like I'm going to jump in, and you don't ever really make those people human. You don't ever really get into their experience and realize like there are people across the country, across our world, who are living a reality that's so much different than yours. And it's important to be able to empathize and then ask, what can you do to help? But tell me a little bit about Ukraine. How do we get involved there, and what are we actually doing there?
Yeah. So we got involved there on day one of Russia's invasion.
Seriously.
Yeah. So our Bethel has missionaries that were in Ukraine long term. They've been there for years. And they were in Kharkiv, which is, I think it's 50 kilometers from the Russian border. So
that's a bad spot to be.
Day one of the invasion, 4 a.m., they get woken up by Russian jets flying over and their city getting bombed.
Holy smokes.
So Kharkiv was under heavy attack. And so they were ready. Like they had their vehicles packed. They had fuel cans, full. They had they were ready. Honestly, nobody was in Ukraine. Hardly anybody actually expected Russia to do it. Like they knew, everybody knew they were building up on the border, but most people didn't. They're like, they're brothers. Like there's no way there's no way. It's just like typical government, like posturing kind of stuff. Like whatever, they'll work it out. Invasion's not going to happen. But through some advice that our missionary was given, he was ready just in case. And thank God he was, because as soon as those jets 4 a.m. started flying, He threw his family, I think they had 5 kids, threw them all in the car and started driving. And so that's happening over there. Meanwhile, so, you know, our missions department and everything is like, okay, like that's our people. Like that's the people that we're, you know, covering in Ukraine and asking to be there on behalf of this church as missionaries. We have an obligation to respond. So what's it going to be? So we started spinning up. Okay, what do we do? You know, at that point, nobody knew. I mean, I think, you know, experts were saying Kyiv was going to fall in 24, 36 hours, you know, like, I mean, it was just crazy. Like, what's going to happen? So we also had missionaries in Romania, which was receiving a lot of refugees. So we told our missionaries in Kharkiv, get to our family in Romania. They're going to house you. They'll put you up. And we knew a lot of other refugees were headed there as well. So we started prepping with them, you know, getting them to get supplies immediately, because we knew there's going to be push and a rush for all these items that were needed. So they started buying food and shelter supplies and things like that day after the invasion. And so we go over, I start calling partners, right? Like, hey, we're going, we got people on the ground. What are you guys doing? And kind of getting them to collaborate and help us with resourcing and funding. And we get on the ground, and another missionary from our house, Max, he's from Ukraine originally. He and his family were missionaries in the Middle East.
Max is awesome.
Max is the man. You know him well. Yeah. And so on my way, like, it happens, I call Max. I'm like, Max, I know you're going. Like, let's go together. And so we go over, and we'd known each other, but it was kind of like you and me before car fire. Like we knew of each other, like we were friendly to each other, but hadn't had that, like, oh, we're brothers, like after this, that bond, like, and so we ended up spending, I think we were in Ukraine for 6 weeks straight after that initial.
So when you first were going, like, how do you figure out what to do? I mean, are you literally just showing up and like, there's a need right there? Or are you working with the Red Cross and all these other places to figure out, like, somebody's got to have a plan? Who comes up with that plan? Yeah,
it's a little bit of all of it. Like, so actually, you know, Chris, I call Chris because Chris Valentin's my boss. And so I call him and was like, hey, we need to get to Ukraine or Romania to help with Ukraine. And he goes, okay, well, yeah, what are we going to do? And I'm like, I don't know. I got to get there to figure out what we're going to do. And he goes, what? Shouldn't we know what we're going to do before we get in it? But we have a saying in disaster response that if you have 60% of the information that you really need to make a decision, you're actually doing really, really well.
It feels true.
There's always your first shot's always that shot in the dark, you know. Yeah. It's like, well, I don't know, like first time, you know, shooting a gun that hasn't been sighted in or anything. Yeah. Like you have an idea, but you really don't know where.
I'm pointing in the general direction.
Right. Like
now let's dial it in.
Exactly.
That's a good example.
And so that's what we did over there of, okay, we know the primary needs that people are going to have. And the same thing, like, yeah, the UN, like they're pretty like, but they're trying to figure it all out too. And they're a lot bigger ship to figure out all of these elements. And so, sometimes being small, like you're on your own for the first while.
You're a little more agile though.
A lot more agile. And so we can be a lot more effective in those early days. And so that's, a lot of the times I'm like, okay, we got to be there now. Cause that's also where the need is the greatest is in those first hours.
Right.
So yeah, we land and, you know, from experience from working with refugee crises before, like you have an idea, but they're all different. They're all unique. And really just leaning on God to be like, all right, like, what do we need? Like, what do your people need in this moment, in this season, in, you know, from the one person that I'm going to encounter to the thousands that we're going to serve? Like, how am I supposed to be operating in these moments? But yeah, so I mean, we make the best plans that we can with the knowledge that we have, and then we figure it out when we're on the ground. So we knew there was going to be hungry people. Like, okay. So like, and we knew there's going to be people that needed shelter. So we start, you know, connecting with YWAM bases, Youth with a Mission
in Romania,
different organization, like Christian organizations that we kind of have like loose relationships with in the regions to start piecing together, okay, how we're going to need infrastructure. So we're going to need housing. We're going to need,
food, water,
bunk
shelter,
beds. We're going to need food, water. Okay. Who do we know that does food? Okay. Mercy Chefs. Do you want to be a part of this? Okay. Joyce Meyer Ministries. Like you guys, they have, because of their videos and everything and their books, like they have stuff all over Global Eastern reach. Europe.
Yep.
So it's like, okay, who do you have? Where are you guys? Where are your offices located? What do you guys
so
doing?
much networking.
So much networking and really bringing the body of Christ together. Like, I don't want to do anything alone. David Meyer with Joyce Meyer says we're better together. Yeah. Like, and that's so true. Like I can only do so much.
Yeah.
But if I can link arms with all these other people that are really good at what they do, then I don't have to recreate the wheel and reproduce what they do. So we started partnering with these organizations, but really what we found was we have people in Ukraine. Like we have super high caliber, trustworthy people all over Ukraine. And our missionaries, he's actually a second generation missionary in Ukraine. His dad was there, started churches, and his dad was like, I think you said it earlier about like the quality of our work.
Yeah.
There's a statement that says the quality of our work becomes the platform of our witness. And this dude and his son, John Lynch, like they lived for 2 generations at such high level integrity and like collaboration with other churches. So they had relationships from like the Orthodox Church, the Baptist Church, to like all these cross denominations, and it was all over Ukraine. And so literally like we got to, lack of a better term, ride on their favor, on John Lynch's favor and relationships. And Max and I were really, in a matter of days, able to build a distribution network all the way across Ukraine, all the way into Kharkiv, which at the time, the United Nations and the Red Cross said it is impossible to get aid into Kharkiv. And Kharkiv was half under Russian control. So it was not a fun place to be.
Yeah.
But it's a city of a few million people. And it was half of it was under Russian control in a matter, like, I think in a day or two. And so, just the horror stories that are coming out of that, so we started doing evacuations. We got access in there. I guess I'm jumping ahead on the story a bit, but through partners, we set up a warehouse in Romania. Whole supply chain's done. Like nothing's functioning in Ukraine from west to east. Whole country's under air raid sirens 24/7. Just nothing's working. But Max's family, his mom, dad, brother, are still in Kharkiv. Like they got Russian tanks in front of their house.
No way.
Yeah. And so Max is like, we're going to Kharkiv.
Like, we're going to go get my family.
Yeah, we're going to go get my family out.
Oh my gosh.
And I'm like, bro, like, I don't know if that's wise. Like, I don't even know if we can. Like, and there's no, like, information is so hard. And like everybody's saying, it's a matter of hours till Kyiv falls and the whole country's Russian controlled, and it's like, man. So I'm like, all right, well, let's go city by city. Like, let's just go step by step. Let's get to Romania. Let's get across the border. Will they even let us into the country? Can we get to central Ukraine? And so we just started piecing together city by city.
How'd you get into the country? Was it hard, or were they just
no?
Like,
they were like, yeah, have at it. You want to come in? All right, here you go.
Wow.
It was wild and heartbreaking. I mean, you're crossing borders and there's like 11 kilometers, and it's snowing, of women and children standing.
No way.
Yeah. They were standing for days waiting, like trying to get out.
Like they're walking.
Yeah. Cause the husbands, no men of military age could leave the country.
Oh my gosh.
And so wait,
the ladies are leaving the country to Romania,
Poland. Men are just getting their families out because everybody thinks the entire country is going to fall to Russian control. And so men are trying to get their wives and kids out. And so, we're crossing in and you're seeing, wives say goodbye to their husband for what they think is, it was so heavy. And so you're seeing that happen. And then there's like, I think the car line at that point was like 43 kilometers, just double laned, bumper to bumper, trying to get out of Ukraine. Nobody's going to. Like we're like, we're going the wrong way here. You know?
So did you put on like some Leonard Skinner and just
bro.
like?
Yeah, no, we were rocking. No, so and before that, I guess totally missed that detail. But so we're praying like, God, we need connections. Like, how are we going to do this? And we actually get connected and with the governor of the region that oversees all the border. And so he's like, the border is yours. Like whatever you need to get across, you tell them you're with me, and you won't have any issues.
Wow.
And so we literally basically started a trucking company. So we got a warehouse on Romania side. And again, this is all through partnership and collaboration with lots of different organizations, but filled that warehouse. And at the height of it, we were doing 6 semi-loads a week. And it was all going
food,
to
water,
the front line, primarily food, water, a little bit of water. Most wells at that point were still working. A lot of baby formula. So this all happened at the same time that the whole world was in a baby formula shortage.
Oh, yeah.
And so, Mercy Chefs found a goat farmer in Norway or something,
they did.
and got this like super high quality baby formula.
Start milking right now.
Yeah, no, they did. And we got like truckloads of formula that we were able to give to, and yeah, that was a cool story in itself. But, yeah, so we were getting all kinds of trucks across and getting it all the way. We ended up getting all the way to Kharkiv. We got into Max's family. And
what was it like? Like you guys are cruising city by city by city. You're watching people come out. Obviously, you're in the mode of like, what do we do if we see Russians? Like, did you have that conversation? Like
constantly. Yeah.
Because there's nothing that says they can't just shoot you.
Oh no, there's nothing. And like since then, like, I mean, we've been operating on the front lines there for over a year.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that.
Like you're a target.
Yeah.
Like
so
it's
you don't
not
have
like they
like,
avoid humanitarian
you're not
aid.
like, you got 2 American flags like blazing behind the van. Like, hey, you can't shoot
We
me.
got crosses on. So we've got crosses.
Okay.
We got badges on our vehicles, like humanitarian aid.
Okay.
But those actually make you a target.
I was gonna say
for like it's pretty dirty stuff going on, you know. So, but also it identifies you to the Ukrainians, so the Ukrainians at least know.
Yeah.
So you kind of got to pick your poison, I guess.
So you guys got all the way to Max's family. What was that like? Did you see the Russians when you were coming in, or did you not encounter them at all?
No, we didn't. We never encountered like soldiers. I mean, we encountered all kinds of shells and missiles, and like,
really,
we're under shelling all the time when we're over there. And so we encounter that. That's frequent, but never. At that point, we had never seen them like directly. Like since then, we've seen them across fields and things like that. But yeah.
So now, like, I know because my son went with you, Elijah, and like he spent, I don't know, 2 weeks there or something like that. And he would be like, Dad, I'm on the front lines. Like this morning, like he would text me like, I woke up to bombing in the city, and I woke up to like, you know, all these crazy stories. Like, tell me about what you guys were doing there, and why are you on the front lines? What's it like? What's happening?
Yeah. You know, my passion's always been, where's the need the greatest? And I want to be in the middle of the storm. That's, I guess, my personal journey. Like where I fell in love with Jesus was in the midst of crisis. Like where I see and where I know my King the most is in the middle of a storm. You know, Bill Johnson says there's only in the shadow of death can you see certain elements of his character and nature. Wow. And so for me, I have that drive to be like, where's the hardest, darkest place? Let's put ourselves there. But also that's where we find the greatest need. Yeah. And so what we found is, okay, actually in these places that others are deeming inaccessible is where we actually find the greatest level of need that nobody else is willing or able to go. And we being small, being all besides myself and your son when he was with me, everybody's local. Like, and so like, they're like, no, these are our communities. Like we're going, we have an ability to be where others aren't willing to be. And so that's kind of what we started identifying is, okay, there's certain areas, and the front line being it, like this, no man's land that's in between Russian and Ukrainian troops. That's where people truly have desperate need.
Because they're stuck.
They're stuck. Yeah. They're stuck either physically. So most of the people that are left are elderly, handicapped, and they're really poor. And so they just don't have, leaving isn't a luxury that they have.
Wow.
But they still need food. They still need water, and they still need hope. Like, most of them feel completely abandoned, regardless of their politics. I mean, you meet people that are more pro-Russian, that are more pro-Ukrainian, but when they're in that, they're like, everybody's abandoned me. Like, and we get to show up and they're like, what? We thought the whole world had forgotten about us. And, Max is so good at being able to tell them, like, well, the world might have forgotten about you, but Jesus surely hasn't, and just gets to give them the gospel as we're giving them food. And we also do a lot of evacuations. So especially in the beginning, when the Russians were taking so much ground, there's so many people needing to be evacuated, both from the Ukrainian side, just wanting to get to places that are safer, but also people that are able to get out from the Russian side and actually evacuate. And it was on one of our early trips. It might've been one of our very first trips to Kharkiv. One of the guys that's running our program now, Tolik, they call him the angel of Kharkiv. Like, that's how he's known in the region. Cause I can't even tell you how many people he's evacuated, how many lives he's saved, how much pounds of food he's delivered. Like, I mean, it's incredible.
He's Ukrainian.
He's Ukrainian. Yeah. Okay. From Kharkiv. He got his family out to Western Ukraine. Actually to Poland. And then on one of our very first trips in, he's like, I'm going with you guys. And so, and we got him a van, and he's like, hey, I want to help evacuate people.
Got him a van and a gas card.
Exactly. Pretty much. And, so on the very first evacuation, he evacuates, like, the van's supposed to hold 6 people. I think we crammed like 29 people in this thing.
That's amazing.
But you can't do it. There's curfews, right? So like you can only drive so far. And then depending on where you are in the country, at that time, it was a 6 p.m. curfew. Like,
or
you can't,
what?
You're suspected to be a Russian. And so,
oh, really?
Yeah. They'll shoot first, ask questions later.
No way.
Yeah. You don't want to be outside of curfew. Especially, I mean, we're talking the first week of the invasion.
Yeah.
Like, we were in country 3 days after the invasion started. Like,
on the front lines.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's wild. Like, there's no law. There's nothing. Like, it's just you.
And people are scared.
People are terrified, and rightfully so. So Tolik, he picks up all these people, and he's got a family. Like, he's got a 7-year-old at home and a newborn baby. So he had a baby girl born, I think, 2 months before the invasion started. Jeez. So he gets them out, is doing this evacuation. They stop close to central Ukraine, so it's safe. There's an overnight shelter that with a church there that we would kind of stay at. They would give us a small meal, and then we'd get everybody to far western Ukraine after that. And so he stops, and it's like 3 or 4 in the afternoon at this shelter. So it's not dinner time, but they give him a snack. So they give him like these little like glucose crackers, biscuit kind of things. And there's a 6-year-old kid that he evacuated. He evacuated a family, and this 6-year-old kid is just nibbling on this cracker, like hardly eating it and just like savoring, treasuring it. And Tolik's like, talks to the mom, is like, hey, what's like, does your kid always eat like that? Like, why does he eat like that? And she's just sobbing. She goes, he hasn't had anything to eat for 3 weeks.
No.
Yeah, that's the first thing he's eaten in 3 weeks. He doesn't understand that there's more. Like, he thinks that's it. 6-year-old. And Tolik just breaks down because he has a 7-year-old at home. He's like, I saw my son doing that. Like, and then so he calls us and he's like, I am not going to stop driving.
I got to go back.
Like, whatever you need, I'm not stopping. And the dude, I think he went like 20 days without any breaks, like just pedal to the metal, evacuating people like from the Kharkiv region. And he's still running with us today. So yeah, I mean, in those early days, it was pretty gnarly. And then as Ukraine kind of settled and kind of started, getting supplies from other nations, we got constantly at every checkpoint, like, oh, American, what are you doing? you have javelin. Like they're
asking
javelin
for
missiles.
rockets. Yeah.
Everybody thought we were CIA because they're
No
like,
way.
no one else in the world's gonna be here. Like there ain't no way. We're like, no. But you want chocolate? We'd give them chocolate. But as kind of the line shifted, you know, in the beginning it was like there's need everywhere.
Yeah.
Like this entire country has need all the way across, from the shelters that are housing people, you know, these churches that all of a sudden have 1,000 people sleeping in them. It's obviously the people on the front line that need to be evacuated, or bomb shelters that need to be supplied with critical supplies. But as that kind of started shifting, we saw the country, you know, after a few months, really starting like middle of summer, late summer, really start to stabilize in Western Ukraine. You know, those lines kind of got isolated to the east. Russia pulled out of the north in the Kyiv area. And really we started to see kind of, okay, we got to pivot with the need. Similar like we did with Car Fire. Like at first it was distribution. Yeah. And as that need that our community is facing pivots, we got to pivot to stay relevant to that need. And we just saw those gaps continue to be where the fighting was the fiercest, and where, where nobody else was able or willing to be. And so we started developing those regions, and that quickly became Kharkiv and Donetsk Oblast and Zaporizhia and things like that. And we actually found a guy in Donetsk Oblast that he was a pastor, and then he was doing deliveries and just on his own. Like he was buying bread and bringing it to these frontline villages and giving them bread until his own finances ran out. And so then he was just going to visit people in bomb shelters and just pray with them. Like he had nothing. And they're like, how, like people would tell him, how are we going to survive? Like you were the only one that was bringing us anything. How are we going to survive here? And he's like, Jesus isn't going to forget about us. We just got to pray. And I think it was that same week that he ran out of his resources, that we found out about him. We're like, hey, like we're just kind of assessing like what the need is here. What are other people doing? And he's like, nobody's doing anything. I was the only one doing it, and I can't anymore. And we're like, well, can we help you?
That's amazing.
And that's Andre, and he's been with us for like 9 months now. So he's running things for us as well. And these guys are just legends. Like they're the salt of the earth guys that literally are putting their lives on the line every day. Tolik took around, you know, Tolik and Andre were driving. They took around. Tolik took 2 pieces of shrapnel through his brain. Was blind for 2 months, like, and is fully recovered and is back in the game.
No way.
Running deliveries. Like, yeah. Like I had to fly over, meet his wife in Poland and drive her into Tolik with Max. And like, we don't know like what's going to happen, you know, but just the strength of that couple, like leading together, like her. Yes. Like it was, cause I was prepared. I was like, man, like, is she going to be so angry at me? Like, and like, I'm going through this, like, what have I done? Like I, in a lot of ways, like I'm responsible for this. Like I helped put this guy in the position that he took around. But she was so graceful about it, and just like, no, my husband and I, we knew God called us to this, and we know we're going to be okay regardless of what happens. Like the level of faith that woman has is like, whoa, another thing.
Bro, so you talk about like encountering, you know, shelling and Russians and stuff like that. Yeah. Like how many times have you been like, wow, I'm afraid for my life?
Truthfully?
Honestly.
There was one time. The first time, so we are on our first time into Kharkiv. So we spent the night in a city that was like 2 hours out of Kharkiv, and like Kharkiv is under occupation. Like I'm like, and I was scared. Like I was like, I don't know if I'm supposed to do this. Like, does this even make sense? Yeah. Like all the things, like, right? How am I going to justify this? Like, I had people telling me like, dude, you can't be there. Like you're the leader. You're supposed to be the director. Like if you go down, everything's going to stop. And I'm like, but I didn't feel right asking guys to go. And I felt like I needed to be there. Like, anyways, it's like wrestling with all these things. And then just like the standard fear of, I don't want to die. Like, I really don't want to die. My boys are home. My wife's at home. Are they going to understand?
Yeah.
So I just hit my knees, man. I just started praying. I was like, Lord, am I supposed to be here? Like, I'm scared. I don't want to die, but I really want to be where you have me.
Mm-hmm.
I need to know, is this where you have me?
Yeah.
And he made it super clear, I'm supposed to be there.
Wow.
Like, this is what I'm created for. And honestly, since then, I haven't had fear.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
That's insane.
Yeah. Like, full peace.
Wow.
Yeah. Like, just knowing this is where I'm supposed to be. Like, and my wife, like, the strength she has.
Yeah, your wife's a beast, bro.
Yeah.
I mean, you're cool, but she's
awesome.
awesome.
She's the better half for sure.
Yeah, she is. My son sent me a video. There was a Ukrainian vehicle stuck in the mud.
Yeah.
And you guys were helping to pull them out while a Ukrainian helicopter is overhead shooting rockets at the Russians. Like,
sure.
You guys are literally on the front lines.
Yeah. Okay. That might have been the other moment where I was like, oh shoot. Like that had some pucker factor.
Yeah. That's a scary moment.
Yeah. Yeah. So that one we were doing evacuations again. That day, all of that day was wild. So again, we were in Donetsk Oblast. Before that happened, we were going in, and we were at a checkpoint, and the Ukrainian military says, no, you guys can't go in. It's way too hot. Like, they're shelling like crazy. Russian, like, they're advancing. Can't go in. You got to wait. So we wait, and kind of like, so we pull back, and Max and I look at each other and we're like, we're not supposed to wait. Like, we both felt Holy Spirit say, don't wait, go. And so Max and I kind of look at each other and, like, instantly on the same page. And we've been working with each other for several months at this point. So, like, we just kind of had to look at each other. And, so I jump in he's already driving. And so I jump in the driver's seat of our second vehicle, and we're like, yeah, we're going. And, we knew a way around from a previous, delivery that we did. We knew a way to bisect this checkpoint. And so we're like, yep, military says we can't go, but God says go. So we're going. And so we go around them. And then after that,
are you playing AC/DC Highway to Hell?
Dude, I love that one. No, we weren't. There was some other more religious people in the band than myself. But yeah, I mean, that one's biblical though.
It could be.
Hey, Bible says the gates of hell will not prevail against the church.
Here we go.
Which means we got to be on the highway to hell to storm those gates. No stop signs, no speed limits.
Yeah.
All that's true for Ukraine. But no, so we go around. Those Ukrainian soldiers, they were in a ditch. I mean, their car was almost vertical. And so we hooked up both vehicles, and we knew we were close to the front line. Like, we're always close. Shelling's going off in the area. But our maps were a little bit out of context. So we thought they were a couple kilometers away. It turns out they were in the field, like right across from us. Like, after the helicopters came and we saw where they were shooting, we could see the tanks, and like we could see we could see the machinery. So, but we don't know they're there. So we're like, oh, we need to help these guys out of this ditch, because we knew the Russians were close.
These citizens are stuck.
Well, we knew they were Ukrainian military, but we're like, we knew Russians were pushing in, and that's part of the reason why we were going to evacuate from the next village. We're like, no, we got to get these guys out, otherwise they're going to be in a world of hurt. So we're getting them out, and one van's not strong enough to get this Mercedes out of the ditch. So we hooked both, tandem, both of our vans up to this Mercedes, and we're in the middle of figuring this out, and just right over the tree line, all of a sudden, out of nowhere, 2 helicopters, and then they start launching their missiles right at the tree line across from us. And we're like, oh shoot. And I look at Max, because I'm driving, so I didn't get a good look. Max is outside coordinating the vehicles. So I'm like, Max, are those Russian or Ukrainian? Because I didn't see the helicopters. And it's like, dude, if those are Russian helicopters, we're done.
Yeah.
No, we're done. Like, there's no, because we're tied up.
Yeah.
Like, and they hit the line there, and then they're turning around, they're banking and coming right back at us.
Yeah.
I'm like, man, like, if it's Ukrainians, we're good. If it's Russians, we're done. He goes, no, they're Ukrainian. I saw a flag. And then sure enough, they fly right over us again, and the Ukrainians, and they were pushing back the Russians, because the Russians were starting to advance through that field, because they were seeing us on top of the ridge. And so pushed it back, dude. Insane. It was crazy. That was a moment where I was like, oh Lord, like, okay, like we're supposed to be where we're supposed to be.
Yeah, dang, dude.
But then we get to the village, and so it's all just in God's timing, right?
Yeah.
Like there's no safer place than being where he has you.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I could just as well die on I-5 on my way here in a vehicle accident.
It's true.
You know? But we get to the village where we're supposed to evacuate people and do some food distribution. And a cluster bomb had just gone over like 5 minutes before we got there.
Wow.
And 5 babushkas were out gardening. So they weren't in their bomb shelter, and all of them got hit, just torn up. So we get there. One had passed, one was gone by the time we got there, and the other 4 were critical. And so it's like, all right, we're no longer doing food distribution, we're doing medical evac. And so like,
are you helping them?
Yeah. So I was a advanced EMT and emergency medic. So
you put on Band-Aids really good.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. Yeah. So we grab our trauma kits, and like we pull everything out of the van. We throw mattresses in, and we load them all up into our cargo van.
All 4 people?
I had 2. So one was mobile. She had several pieces of shrapnel in her stomach. But she was able to sit. She wanted to sit. So we put her in the front seat. One was deceased. I had 2 in my van. We were going to put the 3rd one in, but as we were loading the third one wasn't as critical. A military ambulance showed up. So they took the 3rd one, and so they opened the door, and I'm already, starting to bandage, and I've got my patient assessments going on. I've got, their vitals and everything. So they opened the door, and I just start like yelling at them like what I've got, right? Like just downloading my patient assessment, what I've got. Cause I'm like, oh, it's a military ambulance.
Yeah.
Thank God they're going to take him so I don't have to deal with this. Cause it's bad. Like, I mean, they're torn up, and they just wide-eyed, like, and I look at their hand, and they have this little like 6x8 metal, first aid kit from had to be from the 60s. Like,
that's what they have.
That's what they have. And Max looks at me and is like, dude, they have no training. Like, they're a transport service.
Wow.
And they're like, can you take these? Because the 2 I had were very, very critical. They were actively bleeding out, and head injuries. And so they're like, can you guys keep the critical and follow us? And so they took the non-critical. We had the one in the front seat, and then I had 2 in the back. And we had Max's daughter with a 16-year-old. We're loading up, and I look at her. I'm like, I need help back here. Can you do this? And she just looks at me like a rock, and she's like, I've got this. She's a beast, just like Max's
daughter. Yeah.
She's like, I got this. It's just, she jumps back there with me, and she's assisting me and helping and just calming down the patient. She was a legend. And so yeah, we transport these people, and holding pressure, the whole thing. And like, it's like super bouncy, and Max is driving like a madman. And so I'm like banging on, we're in the back of a cargo van. So there's no windows, there's no lights, or, John, our missionary, is back there translating and holding a flashlight for me. And, it's hot as anything, like, cause we're right over the exhaust. Like, I mean, I got out and I just wrung my clothes out with sweat. But Max is driving like crazy. So I'm banging on this thing like, dude, you got to slow down. I know it's an intense moment, but
ease up a little bit.
Ease up a little bit. Like, literally, they're just bouncing, and like I'm having to like hold their bodies down from getting beat on the thing. And but Max isn't slowing. Turns out, like, afterwards, I was like, dude, what was the deal? And he's like, dude, I had to follow the ambulance. The Russians had taken the primary road that we got those soldiers off of.
No way. That
we came in on. And so we were going through fields, unharvested wheat fields that were on fire from shelling. I'm like, what? No, I had no idea, because I had no windows. So I'm just thinking, like, the road's not this rough. What is Max doing? Like, can he miss a single pothole? Because we're hitting everything. Turns out we were just blazing through fields on fire. We get him to the hospital. We transfer care to the hospital. All 3 were pretty stable at that point. I think they probably made it, but it was just so incredible to be like, oh Lord, like, you have us exactly where we need to be. Like, had we been there 5 minutes earlier, we would have been the victims. Like, we would have been, impacted by that cluster bomb. Had we stopped where the soldiers told us to stop, well, that's the other piece of the story. So we get them to the hospital, and then we're leaving, and that roadblock where the soldier said, you got to stop and wait here, obliterated.
No way.
Gone. They had gotten hit.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So literally had we had done what logic, what reason told us to do, we would have been gone. And then we wanted to been, had we been there 5 minutes earlier, we would have been the victims. Had we been there probably 10 minutes late, those women would have been beyond our ability to save them. So yeah, just always in everything pushing into the Lord. I'm like, all right, where do you want me? Where do you have me? Who do you have me with? And
dude,
running with trustworthy people.
So much of life just feels like that, right? Like if you will attach your yes to God and your partnership to God and just be like, I mean, to me, it's not even just being like willing, it's being proactive, right? Like I'm going to do this thing with my whole heart. I'm going to look for a way. Yeah. I'm looking for a way to intervene, to use my strength, to make a difference. Like that feels like the supernatural lifestyle.
Yeah, absolutely.
And not everyone's going to go to Ukraine. Not everyone's going to go to these disasters, right? But I always say this, like when I'm talking about BraveCo, I always say like the enemy has a plan for your life. He has a plan for your kids. He has a plan for your marriage. Yeah. And it's to bring separation. It's to bring destruction. It's to like devastate, right? Like that's his plan. Yeah. And we were called to go into the darkest places of the earth. Yeah. And I always tell people like, we think the darkest places of the earth are in Africa or in the Philippines or in Ukraine. Yeah. But it's in people's lives. Yeah. It's actually in what your son's going through. It's what your wife's going through. It's what, you don't have to be in Ukraine to show up to somebody's freaking like emergency. Absolutely. To help resuscitate them back to life, that's the reality of where we live at today. And it's so easy to be on this side and be like, dang man, I wish I could go and rescue some people. But the reality, like the honest, true reality is that everyday people are in their own darkest places of life. Yeah. They're in their own hell. And we have an opportunity to bring peace to chaos. Absolutely. Right? To bring identity, to bring strength, to show up for them and to do that, to do the CPR, to show up for them and bring a piece of hope. And I just love that. Like I love the picture because it's real. Like I really do love the picture of like, man, you're doing this because this is what God's called you to do. Sure. You're doing this because this is what you've trained to do. It's what you've prepared to do. But God has called and trained every man and equipped every man to make a difference, to be salt and light, right? To be hope, to bring peace to chaos in some form or fashion. Yeah. And being willing to like step up to that. Yeah. And say yes, but then look for the opportunity. Yeah. Is big.
Well, that's just it. Look for the opportunity. I mean, it's so easy to turn a blind eye. Yeah. Like, and especially the things you're talking about. Like, nobody's going to turn a blind eye to 4 babushkas there bleeding out on the ground. Like, that's not an option. But to somebody that's bleeding out in their heart, but emotionally or in their marriage, that's a whole lot easier to turn a blind eye to and be like, wow, that's not my mess. Yeah.
It's
like,
true.
I'm going to butcher the name, but Felion, he's a French mystic from like the early days, right? But he has a quote that I just love that says, the words are not enough for the kingdom of God. It takes courage, strength, and violence. Wow. And like, that's what it is. Like, we have to be violent. Like, it's not okay to just be passive and like, oh yeah, like when I'm in that moment, I'm going to be there. No, like violence is, I'm proactive. Like we talked about highway to hell. Like I'm actively storming the gates of hell. Like I'm going to trample hell, whether it's in Ukraine, whether it's in my marriage, whether it's in my, my son or my daughter's life, what they're encountering at school. Like I'm going to be violent towards hell.
I love it, dude. To me, it's the man who's ready that's the guy that God's calling upon, right? Is the guy who's prepared and ready. And I just love that picture of in 2012, like you have this heart to, well, even before that, like you realize the church has had the heart, but they haven't been prepared. Yeah. They've had the drive, but they haven't actually taken the practical steps to not be a burden. Yeah. And there's so many things that we can do to really practically take steps to be prepared for our marriage, to be prepared for our kids, to be prepared even for work, right? To be an asset instead of a hindrance.
Yeah.
And man, what you guys are doing and just the work that you've done, we didn't have a bunch of time to talk about Turkey, but it's kind of the same thing, right? Like it's these massive disasters that come. Elijah explained Turkey like this. He said, if every city in LA was flattened.
Yeah. Every building. Yeah.
That's Turkey.
Yeah. Turkey was insane. I've never seen that level of destruction.
Yeah.
Like all the events, like, I mean, it's far bigger than you can comprehend.
Golly.
Yeah. Like it's hard to comprehend when you see it, let alone describing it to people. Yeah.
Well, the world is full of need. It's full of places that are dark that guys have to show up to.
Yep.
And one of the main roles that a man plays is to bring strength to chaos, right? To bring peace to chaos. And
absolutely.
I love what you're doing, Carl.
Thanks, Jay.
Would you just pray for men? I just feel like you have such an anointing on your life just to impart that courage. Strategy too, I think, is a really big thing. And would you do that for the guys?
Yeah, absolutely. Jesus, Lord, I thank you for these men listening, Lord, and these men pursuing fullness and what it is to be men that chase after you in every element of our lives. And God, I ask that you would infuse us with your courage, Lord, that you would make us violent men, Lord, that we would be men that chase after the hurting, that chase after injustices, that aren't willing to turn a blind eye to these things, whether it be at large chaos, international events and chaos, or those tragedies and chaos that happen in individual lives or in our own marriages or in our neighbors, Lord, that you would give us your plans, your thoughts, your desires for how you want to be in the midst of all those storms, Lord. You are a God that is active in the storm, and you're not afraid of them. You walk on the water in the midst of a storm, Lord. So, Lord, would you show us what it is to partner with you in that, to bring the fullness of who you are into those situations. Yeah, Jesus, we love you and we need more of you in our lives, Lord. Amen.
Amen. Carl, thanks again so much for coming on here.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Jay. It was fun.
Honor and a pleasure, man.
Always good hanging out.
Yeah, dude. BraveCo men, listen, find a way to get engaged, find a way to get into the battle and to stay brave out there. Hey guys, thanks so much for listening to the BraveCo podcast. If you like this podcast, would you please rate it, review it, leave us a great comment. And if you like this episode in particular, share it with your friends and family. That helps us to spread the word. Guys, stay brave. We'll see you next week.